Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mind Controllers, a podcast about shining the light on the psychological aspects behind some of my favorite video games, some of our favorite video games. I'm your host, Joe Moreno, joined by my co-host, Brandon Croft, and today we'll be talking about Persona 5.
Yeah.
So, real quick, before we jump into Persona 5, just a spoiler warning, we will be getting into like heavy spoilers. Also, this is a fictional story, so anything we talk about here, we're really just talking about, characters that don't exist. So, just
Yeah.
just a heads up.
Yeah. This
So a
is all
small
very
description of this
informal.
game.
So,
Yeah. So don't take it seriously, right? We love Persona 5. We're here just to share our passion.
hmm
And I hope you guys like it too. So
yeah.
yeah, should I just start off with the small description? What do you think?
Yeah. I think, we want to say a description of this game for anyone who hasn't played Persona 5. And then also, there's a lot of people who might be listening to this who just haven't played video games in general. So,
Hmm.
the description might feel a little like geared towards a non gamer, even though you are a gamer. But yeah, just wanted to get that out of the way, just to give everyone to get everyone on the same playing field here.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, right? Okay, so yeah, let me start with the description, and you can jump in. I mean, we have all those notes, right? So Persona 5 is a turn-based RPG, role-playing game mixed with dungeon crawling, social simulator, and visual novel. So what that means is, you're going to be navigating dungeons. They're called palaces, right? Running into enemies, and how you fight the enemies is turn-based, meaning, you take a turn, the enemy takes a turn. You hit a weakness, you get an extra turn to attack. Persona 5 has something called the baton system, which is essentially, hey, let me pass, this boost I have, right? You hit a weakness, I think you get a boost in attack and recovery, right? So you use the baton pass it to one of your teammates, and you beat the enemy by depleting their life bar. You lose if you lose your life bar. So you hit them harder than they hit you, right? The social simulator aspect comes in when you're meeting characters in the world, or talking to your party members, right? Getting closer to them. There's the confidant system, which is basically, hey, we're making friends, and our friends are have their own levels as well, right? Level one, two, three. You get some benefits depending on what level that is, and you really do that by just hanging out, picking the right conversation pieces and everything, to strengthen your party, to strengthen your bonds, right? And that plays into the gameplay and it makes you stronger. You can summon personas, which are basically like, powers. So it strengthens you as you make friends and continue with that. Yeah, I mean, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I feel like the baton system is like kind of unique. Oh, I mean, calling it baton system is like kind of unique to Persona, at least as far as like some of the RPGs I've played, and that feels like it's a pretty fun and cool mechanic that sets it apart from some other ones. I feel like the combat system in Persona 5 is just really good compared to some of these other RPGs. It's a bit more dynamic. It flows better, and it makes it interesting. And then interweaving that with like the life simulation mechanics of like just hanging out as a high schooler and talking with your friends is it's really fun.
Right, and it makes
Um,
you stronger, right?
yeah,
We want those
it
strong
makes you
personas, that's
stronger.
for sure.
Yeah, hanging out with your friends makes you stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
But yeah, like you mentioned, it is it's a weird like dichotomy of this action like turn-based RPG of choosing which attacks and who to attack, paired with this very text-heavy, dialogue-heavy
The
gameplay,
visual novel,
the
right?
visual novel. Yeah, and
Hmm.
when you combine them, you would think that maybe that wouldn't really work too well together, but in this game, they're just integrated seamlessly, and it flows very well. It's very satisfying to play, and you feel like you're actually building relationships with like some of these characters that you're playing with and talking to, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the other things, this takes place in like modern day Japan. I forget. Do you remember exactly what city in Japan it was?
Tokyo, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
Tokyo, and then you had the different prefectures that you could go through.
Right, because I think Shibuya is right is where like the gun
hmm
shop is, all those shops, the Big Bang Burger as well, right? I think it's called. I hope
yeah,
it's called that.
yeah. There's a gun shop that the high schoolers get access to in this game.
Yeah, in Japan,
They're
right?
toy guns. And yeah, the personas, which is like a another interesting mechanic. They're kind of like I feel like this is minimalizing it, but they're kind of like Pokemon, like demon Pokemon that you could like kind of catch
Hmm.
and fuse and like train to fight with you. And they get each persona that you have equipped will have like a special ability, and that kind of changes the combat mechanics a bit.
Right,
Um,
right. They all have their
yeah.
weaknesses, strengths, right?
Hmm.
Abilities, there's a lot to it, right? And I don't want to disregard Shin Megami Tensei as well. That's where it all started,
Hmm.
right? Well, Megami Tensei or whatever started back in
Yeah.
80s and 90s or whatever, right? Um,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it really is, you're collecting these personas, right? You're making yourself stronger. You're able to fuse them. I don't think we talked about fusion, right? Um,
Right. Right. That's a
so
very
you
fun
can
mechanic.
fuse, yeah, it's super fun because you can get stronger personas, right? You get their abilities, their moves, right? And then you just,
Hmm.
just steamroll through a lot of things, right? And New Game Plus, right? You just have all these personas you collected throughout the whole game, when you start a
Yeah.
New Game Plus, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it really is. And you collect these personas. Did we talk about the palaces and mementos and stuff? Like,
I think I just mentioned them, but no, go for it.
oh, okay. Yeah,
Take
I
it
guess
away.
just to give a bit more context into like the gameplay, you traverse these places. Well, there's two places. One of them is called a memento, and that's for the psychology people out here who are listening. That's like the Carl Jung's collective unconscious, right? Or is it
Correct.
collective conscious? It's unconscious,
Collective
right?
unconscious. Yeah.
Oh,
Consciousness.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this
You're good.
physical manifestation of the collective unconscious, and that like works in the game by you like traversing like the Japanese subway system, and in there you could sometimes find other people's like psyches who
Hmm.
might need some help and assistance, and you could run into them and do these little quests. But you're also running into some other personas that you fight down there or can like capture. And those are the mementos. The palaces are a bit more geared towards specific the specific antagonists for the most part,
Right.
where it's like this physical manifestation of that villain's psyche, kind of where they'll enact like their wild fantasies
Hmm.
and harm these other people's psyches, which in turn harms them in the real world. And this is what causes the protagonists to want to stop them, because these villains are actually like hurting people, even though they're like all in their mind and doing these crazy things to them just in their mind.
Right. And then these dungeons, these palaces, they're handcrafted, right? I think the developers like planned it all out, right?
Hmm.
Because I think Mementos has a little bit of the randomized like level structure, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. I do think the mementos are randomized for the most. Oh yeah, no, entirely. I
I
think
think they
like
are.
there are different levels to them. Like you could go upstairs and downstairs, but and like
Hmm.
some things will happen only on like level 5 as compared to level 3. But the general layout of each level is randomized, I believe. So good. That's a good call. And yeah, I think putting all of that together, this game is heavily influenced by psychology in general.
Oh
And
yeah.
this is the fifth game in here. And I think it was like back when the first game came out, there was some interview we found with like the directors where they're talking about their psych influences. And once again, I'm going to bring him up again. Carl Jung is like a huge influence on this game. A lot of the concepts that he created were turned into actual like video game mechanics in here. So yeah, I think with that note, maybe giving them a little background, a little history on good old Young could help us understand where they were coming from when building this game.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, before we get to that, do you wanna talk about why we picked the Persona 5 first?
Oh yeah, I mean like I think it boils down to like because it's such a psych influence game, psychology
Yeah.
influence game, and we both we met in grad school, have our masters in clinical psychology. You're an actual therapist right now. I
Hmm.
am not.
Associate, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean you're
yeah. I'm not licensed yet. Yeah.
oh
But
yeah,
yeah,
but you're on your way, and you're definitely going to get there compared to me, who's doing data right now. So, either way, we're both really into psychology, and this game kind of fused both of them. like fused our love for video games and psychology into one thing. So I think this was the main reason. This was our natural first choice for a game to discuss. But yeah, was there anything else?
No, I think, we're both, clinical psych majors, right? Persona, I played, I think I played all of them, at least the main line. And that includes one, two, part two, right? Three,
Hmm.
four. Just, I spent a lot of time with these games, right? And then it really, I just want to say that it really impacted me in a way of like, you know what? Let me look at psychology as a major in my undergrad, right? Persona 4 was the game that made me do that. Like look more into psychology seriously. So these games
Hmm.
felt, these games like hold a special place in, and they're long games.
Absolutely.
So they're kind of like companions in a way, right? Like when I played Persona 1, I was in a different space than I am, as we're talking about Persona 5 now, right? Persona 5 Royal.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, or you think we're good to move on to a little bit about Carl Jung?
Yeah, no. Let's tell him about Carl Jung.
All right, so Carl Jung was born on July 26, 1875. He worked with Sigmund Freud, who is considered the founder of psychoanalysis. However, for the podcast sake, we'll be focusing on Jung's work regarding the personas, the shadows, and archetypes, because it fits nicely with the game. These
Hmm.
concepts form the basis of the Persona series, as the protagonists utilize their personas to defeat shadows throughout multiple dungeons, in this game, palaces, right? And even mementos. So we plan on explaining the concepts to provide some background for those who are unfamiliar a little bit, with psychology and Carl Jung. So real quick, we'll go through what an archetype is. So an archetype are, these are the patterns, thoughts, and behaviors within an individual, that strive to be realized in an individual's environment. What can make real? This is expressed as a certain concept. For example, an example I have is, a maternal figure who closely matches the child's idealized concept of a mother, which can evoke innate expectations and activate the mother's archetype in the child's mind. Essentially, the child knows who or what mom is. So we kind of follow these archetypes. And some of them that we have that, we looked up together, and studied as well. The hero, this is an
Hmm.
archetype, a character who exists on the fringes of society, the outlaw that rejects the status quo and attempts to change by liberating themselves from oppression. So our main character here in Persona 5 is Joker. That's his code
Hmm.
name. So he kind of fits that archetype, the outlaw. He's considered a criminal, right? He's trying to change society. People view him as a delinquent. Even like at the beginning of the game, he's like outcasted, right? It's like, oh, this guy has a knife. He's crazy.
Yeah.
He's just a cool dude just trying to get through life. But, he was bestowed the power of the persona. And he
Hmm.
can fight oppression, by stealing the hearts of his adversaries. So this is where it comes in with the dungeons and the palaces. At the end of the palace, you're stealing those hearts, those desires, right? To kind of have the antagonist change their perspective, right? And like, hey, what I'm doing is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. So it's changing their oppressive natures. So Joker
Hmm.
does embody that hero archetype, that outlaw archetype, and one that, I was looking into was the magician, another archetype, represents the ability to transform, manifest desires through knowledge, willpower, and understanding of natural laws. So in this game, one of our companions is Morgana, this cat creature, right? And their tarot card is the magician, I believe.
Hmm.
And I found it interesting because Morgana understands how mementos works, right? How the palaces works, how I think he explains battle to you as well, how the battle works. So he
Yeah.
understands the laws of, what's going on. Right. So this one like fit really well. So these are some of the archetypes in the game. There's tons more, right? We don't want to spend like 2 hours explaining all of them, right? So we'll move on to what a persona is.
Hmm.
But before I do that, do you have any thoughts or anything?
I was just going to mention that. How many are there? There's 12, right? 12 archetypes.
I believe so.
Yeah, I just quickly counted them. Yeah, there's 12, and in the game, there is someone assigned to each archetype. And that's why we're explaining this right now. It feels like the archetype is kind of a core mechanic in the plot of the game, because each one's like assigned an archetype. It feels like those characters' plots kind of follow
Mhm.
the description of these archetypes. The obvious one is the hero. The main character you play is considered the hero and is doing courageous acts, difficult challenges. So it's integral to like the character design and like the plot of the game. So it made sense to kind of explain that concept a bit further, which is why we're doing that right now. But
Right,
yeah,
right.
I think the second most important concept is probably going to be the persona right here.
Yes. So yeah, the persona, right? This is the social mask that we put on to present ourselves to the world. Think about
Mm.
how, I'm going to be different in a professional setting, as an associate therapist, right? I'm not going to be, light and like, outgoing. No, no way, right? That's not my persona when I work with clients,
Uh-huh.
um,
Sure.
versus casual setting, when we're hanging out, right?
Yeah.
It's totally different, right? So it's sort of the mask, the facade we put up to deal with life. So an individual puts on this mask to fit the environment or the situation they're presented with. Jung endorsed that a persona conceal the true nature of the individual. So we have this true nature, right? Maybe the person that we see in private, right? Like kind of like who we are with no one around. We're using these personas outside in the real world, and if we move on to the shadow,
Yeah.
which is these are considered the negative aspects of an individual that remain hidden. Things that you hide from other people. This concept is taken further in Persona 4 as you fight your own literal shadow, right, to gain your persona. And when I mean fight, it's you accept them, right? You still do a boss fight, yeah, you still fight them, but at the end, you accept who you are, your shadow, the negatives, to make that person whole, right? And that gives you the power of the persona. And Persona 5, I don't think it's like that. I don't believe, and it's been a couple years since I think we both played this game, right?
Yeah.
But I've had what I think Persona 5 Roll was my third playthrough of Persona 5. So, I'm trying to dig up those memories. But yeah, that for, archetypes, personas, and shadows, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I didn't know that you would fight the persona in order to take control of it. Cause yeah, I don't remember doing that in Persona 5. And Persona 5 was my first Persona game I played. So
Mm.
I wasn't familiar with any of the mechanics before this game. So yeah, you said in previous games you would have to fight the persona in order to.
In four, yeah. So in four,
Oh.
the way that worked was like one of the characters would find them like selves at the end of the dungeon, and they would be like, who are you? This kind of stuff, right? It's them. It's their shadow, and so the character would be like, no, I wouldn't say those things, right? Because the shadows are the negative aspects. And so when that
Mm-hmm.
happens, the shadow turns into a boss, right? And you have to defeat the boss. And at the end of the boss fight, the character chooses if they're gonna accept their shadow or not. I don't want to spoil Persona 4. We're going to spoil Persona 5. We'll get to Persona 4 some other time, I'm sure.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. Yeah.
Ah, okay. And then does it like I mean that's kind of like how the palaces are in Persona 5, I guess, with like the final bosses of each palace being the kind of like the shadow of
Hmm.
that villain. And then
Yeah.
once you beat them, then they they chill out like in the real life, like they start becoming normal again. So it's like these the personas of the villains are kind of like their I don't know. I'm trying to think of like the psych concept. So I was gonna say like their id just kind of like taking over, and it's just like what they really want. And then
Hmm.
by defeating their shadow in the palace, it like takes them back down. And like, was there any villain that just didn't I don't know that didn't become remorseful afterwards, and that was
The ones
still
that
like.
died. Right?
Oh, right. I mean, we put a spoiler warning for Persona 5, so which
Oh,
would
yeah. We're going
do
to
you
get into the
remember?
spoilers. It was, I think, Haru's dad, right? Okumura, I think his name was. I think he was the fifth boss, perhaps. This is the one
Dang,
with the mechanized dungeon, the mechanized palace. I don't remember if you remember the robots.
the mechan. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Damn, he dies afterwards.
Yeah, because a character we'll talk about later murdered his shadow. So you're not supposed. So when you beat the boss,
Oh.
you're not killing the boss, right? So I think we should make that distinction, right? So the protagonist
Mm,
beat them into submission, basically, right? That oh, I can't, but they don't kill the boss. If you kill the boss in this universe, it causes like a psychotic breakdown, and it's made to look
right.
like they had a heart attack or some like medical condition, right? And that's why they passed away. But in reality, it was somebody who killed their shadow.
Oh my gosh. I forgot about a lot of these implications. Oh man. It's yeah, that's wild. Especially like the thought of there being like your consciousness is just somewhere that these teenagers can enter and then like murder you
Mm.
without it ever being shown, or like there's just like kind of no evidence of it. Yeah, that's really eerie.
Yeah, when you put it
Yeah.
that way, yeah.
Like,
But it's
we're
fictional, right?
assuming. Yeah, I mean, thankfully it's fictional because we're just assuming that all these kids are like good, which is
Hmm.
ironic because like when you first meet a lot of these characters and a lot of these side characters, they're one of them in particular, Ryuji, is just painted as like a delinquent, like a bad boy. Yeah, I mean, even the
Right.
main character is portrayed as a delinquent. Here he is going around saving lives. Well, trying
Hmm.
to save lives.
That's a reason why one of those characters that we'll talk about later,
Yeah.
has that kind of love-hate relationship with the main protagonist. Right? He's doing what
Uh,
this guy can't do. What you know.
and it's going off of his form of justice, which he feels justified because of his status. And the man, okay, we'll wait till we get there
We'll get
because
there. Yeah, we'll get there.
yeah, um, yeah. I think on that note, we you did a great job like summarizing Carl Jung's concepts into Persona Five,
Thank you.
and
Appreciate it.
this game has a lot of characters. There's a lot of people, and we wanted to talk about all of them. We talked about maybe like mentioning something for every one of them, but it's just like it's kind of hard to because each person kind of has their own trauma to unpack
Hmm.
and so much to dive into, just like their history that is discussed off screen of the game, that you find out through other like dialogues or like reading stuff about them. So yeah, we had to narrow it down to just like two who we felt very motivated by or like inspired by, one of which is like the therapist at the school and the other one is a protagonist slash antagonist. And I
Mm.
actually the therapist is also kind of fits that same
Yeah.
uh label of protagonist turned antagonist or vice versa. And I don't know, I found that really fascinating, and that's kind of what drew me to it. The fact that I always love when a character like switches sides, like freaking
Mm.
Zuko from Avatar the Last Airbender,
Right.
of just like seeing this character from one point of view, from like the protagonists hating on them or like having trouble with them, to then like getting them onto their side. But the two characters we're going to focus on are Goro Akechi
Goro,
and
Akechi.
Maruki, who is first name is Takuto.
I mean, we can hit, I guess the structure of the podcast, right? I mean, we're going to be explaining the character, right? So I'll be explaining Goro Akechi. We have a case study, because we both did a clinical psych program and we were thrown case studies left and right, right? So we made our own case studies, and I just want to say, these are not real, actual, like we're going to give actual real diagnoses, right? These are provisional, this is all for fun, fictional,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just the what if they walked into our office. And I think it should be noted that, we're using a Western lens of psychology, right? Japan is
Mm-hmm.
in the East, right? They have Buddhist psychology and other psychologies as well that we probably didn't study, So this is our
Mm-hmm.
lens. And I just want to preface that, that it's our lens, what we learned.
Yeah. No, no, thank you for that. I great that you mentioned that because yeah, a lot of psychology is contextual and subjective to where you're living and like the standards of the society that you live in. So shit, even video games that like kind of the same thing of where it's like subjective to the standards within the game. But this is by no means anything formal. We will be like talking about like diagnoses and like kind of giving them a diagnosis based off of like the way you're supposed to, quote unquote.
Using a DSM, right?
Yeah, exactly. Going through the DSM, picking out examples, or yeah, picking out like examples that fit certain criteria for certain disorders. And yeah, but this isn't to say that they for sure have this, and we aren't the end all be all for video game psychology. So some
Right.
other psychologists might say that they have a different disorder, that they don't even have these disorders, and like that's completely valid. We're just kind
Hmm.
of, I don't know, having fun with this, and yeah. So I think, like you said, we're probably going to talk about the background, of each of our characters, and then go into like some of the psychology concepts that are like present in these people's backgrounds,
Hmm.
and give them the diagnoses. We also wrote case studies. I'm like still debating if we should just read the case study out loud because a lot of them are just the background information like put together. We put a lot of effort into this, so I'm like,
Yeah,
if
I
we
don't
don't
mind reading
read
it
them,
out.
Yeah. Or even if we don't, I would put them in the show notes anyways. So like people could read
Okay.
it and see what like a psych case study is supposed to look like or sound like.
No, I agree.
So, and then after that, we'll give them the diagnoses and yeah. I do want to mention before we dive into our two characters that there was a third character that we did find very interesting. In the game, she is mostly going by Kasumi, and then you
Mhm.
find out later on that her real name is Sumire, and she was donning the persona or like the personality of her now dead sister,
Right.
because she couldn't accept that. I forget. It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't her fault. A car ran her over, but like she was somehow involved with it. And if
Hmm.
she,
There was guilt,
yeah,
right? A lot of guilt,
yeah,
probably
yeah,
shame. Yeah.
a lot of guilt and shame. So, because of that, she started taking on the personality. And there's some other stuff that happened that caused her to take on this personality as well. But we figured we were going to be talking about that in like both of our own case studies with our two characters that we've chosen. So we decided to skip over it, but wanted to give her an honorable mention because it was pretty fascinating to have this character pretend to be her dead twin sister for the majority of the game. Sounds like a lot of psych stuff going on there, and felt like
Oh
it could
yeah.
have been a deep dive, but it still could be. But maybe we'll touch on it again later. Maybe
Yeah, I was
not.
about to say maybe a later time, right? Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So with that being said, I feel like sounds like it's time to dive into Goro Akechi and what he's been up to, what he's doing, and why he's a bad boy.
Oh, he's not that bad, right? He's very misunderstood. I love this.
Yes.
Love this character. Okay, so Goro Akechi is a 17, 18-year-old detective. He's working for the police force, I believe. So a little bit of his background was, his mom was a, and this is going into the wiki, right? So some of this stuff might be up for
Oh
debate.
yeah.
But mom was a sex worker who was shamed for having a child out of wedlock, and his dad is actually one of like the main antagonists, right? Shido, right? The guy that we're going after for putting the protagonist in jail.
Oh,
Um,
I forgot
yeah,
about
yeah,
that. That's his dad?
that's his dad. So this is
What the
so Goro Akechi's dad is the main bad guy, right?
Whoa.
Um,
Oh my gosh.
mhm.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's I was that blatantly said in the game and it just went over my head, or like I'm just not remembering it, or was
it
it
might have been a while.
deeper?
When's the last? When did you play the game? It might have been a while.
2019.
Okay,
20 the end of 2019 is when I played it. I believe. Or wait, when did Persona 5
I
Royal
think we
come
were
out? I'm
still
going
in
to find
grad
out real
school,
quick.
right? I think so. So
Yeah. It came out October 31st, 2019. I'm pretty sure I played it in like December of 2019 is when I started it.
okay, okay,
So it's been like 3.5, about almost 4 years, over 4 years.
okay. Yeah, you're not gonna remember everything. I can tell you that
Yeah.
right now. Like I played this game 3 times, and I'm just questioning myself. Yeah, did this happen? Did this? Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So no worries there. I mean, and I'm sure we can do another deep dive at the wiki again, right? But yeah, so
Yeah.
Shido is his dad, right? His mom, I don't think they even assign a character name or anything for her, right? So she's, working at the red light district. So what this means is
Hmm.
essentially, she's a sex worker. She would tell Akechi to go like to, a bathhouse to kind of get away from her. She's doing her business and trying to raise a kid, right? She's trying to do the best that she can. But eventually, I think she did take her own life. So that left Akechi, alone. According to the wiki, family, relatives tried to take care of him, but they took no interest in him. And so he was in like the foster care system, right? And so doing a
Hmm.
little search history, just searching through the internet, and I'm thinking about the stigma of, illegitimate child in Japan, and traditional Japanese culture, with I think wedding rate in Japan's pretty low, right? Birth rate I think is low as well. So like, what does this look like to be an illegitimate child? So Akechi had to deal with that, whatever that looked like in Japan, right? I'm
Hmm.
sure it wasn't easy. Family really didn't take an interest in him, so he was alone. I didn't include too much about attachment theory. Do you remember attachment theory from grad
Yeah.
school?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
I
go
was going to
ahead.
say, were you about to explain it or give a short?
No, just like I might touch upon it, when we go through the psych aspects of, Goro Akechi. We'll get to that. So I did a little research. Non-marital births in Japan are rare. I think in 2011, 2.2% of all children were born to parents unmarried. So it's very, it happens, right? But it's very rare in Japan. So with Akechi, growing up alone essentially without a dad, mom's gone, family doesn't care. There's going to be a general distrust and dislike of society because who's taking care of this kid? No one. He's most likely taking care of himself. And eventually he finds out who his dad is, right? And eventually he starts to work for him, carrying out these executions, right? So this is when,
Hmm.
earlier we mentioned, how sometimes a character will kill the boss. Goro Akechi is that character. So Shido would assign him to assassination runs, basically, right? Like, oh, this
Yeah.
guy doesn't agree with me. Hey, can you go take care of this guy, right? And this is all happening in like the metaphysical mementos palace world. So this is not happening in like real life. He's running around in somebody's brain essentially. So Akechi is chained to the past. He has a lot of things that are chaining him to the past. And like I mentioned, essentially he's the executioner for his dad. And the idea is that, hey, once he learns that who his dad is, Shido's his dad. He's working for Shido. He's doing this to get closer to Shido. So eventually, he can take his dad out because he is upset, and rightfully so. He's vengeful. That hey,
Hmm.
you left his mom, right? Like, he grew up with no one, right? And Shido did not take any responsibility. So that's a little bit of the background. What makes Akechi Akechi. So some current
Yeah.
info we have during the this takes place during the game now. How
Yeah.
he appears. So Akechi is like well mannered, friendly, humble, charismatic, well dressed, has a strong sense of judgment and justice. He's a detective, right? He can come off as a perfectionist, but doesn't make. He'll still make a mistake, right? Do you remember how he the main protagonist, the group catches him off guard in the game, like, hey, he's the traitor. It's obvious, but like, do you remember that moment
Yeah.
in the
Vaguely.
studio?
Oh man. Kinda.
Do you
Only
remember
vaguely though.
pancakes? Do you remember pancakes?
Oh man, I wish I did because it sounds like a funny inside joke for
Okay,
the game.
so the way that the group's like, hey, he had a persona, huh? Because the group were talking in the recording studio, right, with Morgana, which is a cat, who you
Hmm.
can only hear if you have a persona. So
Hmm.
Morgana mentioned something about pancakes, right? And so the group are talking about pancakes. I think they're trying to get lunch or something, breakfast, whatever. And Akechi overhears, and he's like, "Did I hear something about delicious pancakes?" And they're like,
Oh
"What?"
yes.
Right? Like, how would you know
Yeah.
that? Because the cat said it, right? And you only understand the cat if you have a persona.
I forgot
So
about
there
that.
was like that. It's kind of silly, right? Because it's like, ha, I caught you. So that's how we're like, oh, he's the traitor, right? Yeah,
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention real quick, like, because the reason he has such a strong sense of judgment and justice is because he's like a famous kid detective. So I
how he
think he
got
feel
there, I don't think
yeah.
that's ever explained, right?
I don't think so. I don't remember an explanation for that at all, but like he's like doing interviews and stuff on talk
Hmm.
shows about like certain cases that he's taken on, and like I forget, was he actually like a lawyer and representing people in like court or something, or
I
was he
don't,
used in a,
I don't think he
uh
was a lawyer.
testimony or
Um,
something? Like I don't know. Oh, like a expert. What is it called? Not an expert wit. Is it an expert witness? When like you have to get like someone to the stand to talk about their expertise, like to see what they think about this like criminal situation. I think that might have been like kind of what he was doing. But
maybe
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I think because he has this fame, because he's like an executioner, an assassin for his dad, he feels like whatever he believes is like the correct and just thing.
Hmm. Right, you're right about that. Yeah. He sees no flaw. I
Yeah.
mean, he's like, this is for justice. This is, to make things right. Right. So
Hmm.
he's charismatic. He appears cheery. Right. I mean, he's like, I think
Hmm.
they call him this the second coming of the Detective Prince, which the first Detective Prince is again Persona 4. We could talk about that some other time. But yeah, he doesn't view the Phantom Thieves, which are the protagonists, right? Joke or Ryuji, which is I think his code name is Skull. All those guys. The
Yeah.
protagonists, right? He doesn't view them favorably, right? He thinks that what they're doing is wrong, despite Akechi, using his own powers to murder. Interesting. So he's the one that's causing like mental shutdowns in the game initially, right? Because there's one boss you fight, and I think it's Madarame,
Yeah, yeah.
and he asks something about like a guy in a black mask, and the
Mm,
protagonists are dumbfounded. They're like, "What are you talking about?" Right? Like, what is going on? But I think that's like the first time where you hear that somebody's using their persona, yeah, like to
yeah.
kill. And so it's like, whoa, what's going on? So near the
Yeah.
end of the game, Akechi believes, this is a way to get revenge on his father, get him close, and then take his life, right? Or get him. Maybe he wants an explanation of, why'd you leave mom?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because this character, he technically has three personas. That's a little off because Joker's the one that has like multiple personas, right? He's the one that can like switch personas left and right. Right?
Joker,
Akechi,
yeah,
when you
the
meet
main
him,
character. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the main character. When you meet Akechi, he has this, I think, Robin Hood persona. Robin Hood. What do
Mm,
you picture when we talk about Robin Hood?
yeah, just I don't know, just like a sense of justice for the
Right.
common folk.
Yeah, taking from the rich, right, and giving to the poor, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a point in the game where, yeah, that wasn't his true nature, right? Do you remember that moment in the game where like this other persona comes out of him? Like I think it's like striped and it's like red and black. I think. Do you remember that?
No, not really. I'd have to
Okay.
look at the wiki to see what it looks like again.
Gotcha. No worries, no worries. But essentially, that is his true persona, and the persona's name is Loki. And Loki exudes
Mm,
power, right?
the
So this is
trickster
when
god.
Akechi's like, I'm out. I'm no longer this charismatic, caring, cheery guy. No, I'm gonna mess things up, and I'm gonna mess up Joker, right, and his team. And he gives into
Damn.
his true nature, right? And even his costume changes because initially his costume was like white, right, very prim and proper. Kind of looks a
Yeah.
little bit like like a not a military uniform, but something like you wouldn't see off the street. It's like someone very well dressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then once he transforms or he loses control and gives into his true self, it's like Black Crow type armor, right? And he's just like disheveled and like, there's just a change in his personality, the way he speaks. He's more on edge. And to see that, it's like, whoa, right? It's like there's something, going on here with Akechi. That's another reason why I chose him. It's just like that shift. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really interesting, really cool.
Yeah, yeah, it made for a good antagonist and made for like a more compelling story and more interesting character. I
Mhm.
totally agree. Like he was fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, I love this character. It's so cool. He's so cool. Eventually he realizes that Shido manipulated him. So
Mm,
manipulated Akechi, right? Because Akechi finds out, like, hey, Shido knew what was going on, and Shido was going to take Akechi out anyways.
mm-hmm.
And the way that Akechi learns this is like through Shido's cognition, through the palace, right? True desires come out, whatever. Shido's like, this is what I wanted to do, win the election, and kill his son, Akechi, right? Which is, it's like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So that's another aspect, like we talked a little bit about his dad, and then the way that Akechi interacts with the protagonist, which the protagonist Joker, right? He's kind of a blank slate, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
that's the character, like that's who we're playing, right? So we kind of insert ourselves into this character and do good or whatever. But you see Akechi kind of build a bond with the protagonist, and this is like the
Yeah.
first bond he's ever had. So there's a lot of like, Akechi's happy, he's making a friend, right? But there's a point where it turns a little dark and
Yeah.
Akechi sees him as his rival, sees the protagonist as his rival. Like, hey, you have friends. It seems like even though the protagonist, he was thrown in jail for what Shido did, right? I don't know if should we get into what Shido did maybe in a little bit. Akechi's like, how can the protagonist who, went to jail, right, is considered a delinquent, right, isn't famous like Akechi, right? How does he have friends and how does he have this structured life and how is he doing good, right? That shouldn't be happening. So Akechi kind of grows like this kind of weird, disorganized attachment to the protagonist. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said there. And so in the third semester, which I wasn't sure if we were going to talk about the third semester, but since we did the spoiler warning,
It's fine.
Akechi just doesn't care anymore how he's viewed, right? He's just like whatever. He's let it all hang out. He's like delighting in killing shadows. Refers to the enemies as scum. Expresses a desire to kill like the final boss Maruki outright. Like we should just kill him. Whatever, get it done. He just doesn't care
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And so to see that
Yeah.
shift from that character, it's just prim and proper at first, and you see Loki, the Loki phase where he's like he's losing it a little bit, he's on edge, and then at the third semester where he's just like I don't care anymore. I don't care how you guys see me. I'm just gonna do what I do. There's something that can be said
Yeah.
about that. I mean, so that's some. That was actually a lot of background info
Yeah.
on Goro Akechi, and we
On
haven't even
Goro
gotten to the
Akechi.
Psych concepts. So
I
yeah,
know.
anything you want to add before I get to that?
No, not really. I just the more you're talking about it, the more I'm like, damn, I do not remember half of this stuff. It's been so long since I played this game. I wish I remembered more, but no, thank you for like filling that in. No, it was definitely helpful, and it's all coming back as you're saying it, and
Gotcha.
yeah, I just fascinated by him, Akechi's character.
I've really enjoyed like what they did with this character. Right? It's
Yeah.
just I know I haven't seen anything like this before. Maybe Sephiroth maybe has his own thing going on, right? But that's Final Fantasy.
Mm.
That's somewhere else.
That's
Um,
next episode.
that's next episode. Um, all right, let's move on to some psych concepts. Going back to Carl Jung, referring to the persona, the mask, like I mentioned, different personas to face the challenges of life. So again, I mentioned Akechi appears charismatic, proper in public. That is his mask.
Hmm.
That is the mask he's using. When he's up on TV, being the detective, right? He's like a celebrity in this universe. That's what
Hmm.
he's using. He's using the charismatic energy and nature, right? But the protagonists, they know who Akechi is, right? He is not that guy. So again, referring back to the mask, right? The personas. Akechi can control two personas, Robin Hood and Loki. And in the third semester, they fuse. I don't remember the name of the persona, but I know they fuse, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, again, the personas are different masks. I think it's like Hayward.
I'm gonna go on the wiki right now to
Yeah,
see.
go for it. Go for it. Yeah, so I mean, if you
Yeah.
find the persona. So
Mm,
moving a little bit away from, Young, I got some stuff on Freud here. I think you mentioned the id earlier, right?
mhm.
So the id, ego, and superego. So for those of you that,
Here,
go ahead.
here word, here word.
Hear
I
word.
think
Okay.
if we're gonna pronounce it like in English, without the Japanese like style,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Is that the one that kind of looks like Batman, I think?
Yeah, I wonder if I could. Am I able to share my screen on this? I might be able to share my screen.
No, yeah,
Um.
because I read something somewhere where like Robin Hood kind of appears like Superman at first, right? Because he's like all white or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And so I think his name is Hereward, right? Or Herward, or
Yeah.
he kind
Yeah.
of looks
Here
like
word. I
Batman,
think.
right? Yeah,
He
he's
does.
got
Yeah.
like the
Let's
like the dark suit.
absolutely. There's Robin Hood. So it
hmm
kind of looks like the darker version of Robin Hood.
No, but I read somewhere like Robin Hood kind of looks like Superman, and then Hereward looks like Batman. It's something interesting.
I could see that.
Because their sense of justice is different. The way that they enact justice is different. So Akechi at first,
Hmm.
the detective, prim and proper, and then in the third semester, he just doesn't care. He'll take no prisoners. He doesn't care to get his justice, right? Yeah, so just an interesting connection that I found online.
Yeah.
So going back to Freud, the id, the ego, the superego, for our, listeners who aren't clinical psych majors or psych majors in general, right? The id is the impulsive, unconscious part of our psyche that responds to like basic urges, needs, and desires. Think of a newborn.
Hmm.
They need to eat, right? They need to go to the restroom, or whatever, right? The ego, Freud said, it's the rational part of our psyche that mediates between the instinctual desires of the id, right, and the moral constraints of the superego.
Yeah.
So the ego operates in like the reality, working out realistic ways of satisfying the id's demands while avoiding negative consequences, right? So it's like, how can
Hmm.
I, make myself happy, without breaking the law, essentially, right? Or giving into like a desire that could get you in trouble. And
Hmm.
let's see, the superego, this incorporates our values and morals of society, what we're learning from parents or, whoever our role models are. The superego is the part of the unconscious that is the voice of the conscious, and the source of self criticism. So this is the one that, doing what is right, morality and all of that.
Yeah.
So all of this to say that Akechi gives into his id, giving into the desire he wants. He wants revenge. He wants to prove himself to Shido. To do so, he's inducing psychotic breakdowns by killing a person's shadow.
Hmm. Hmm.
He's doing what he needs to do, right, so that he can get that revenge. When Akechi uses Loki, his second persona, he gives into his aid and desires to defeat or kill the Phantom Thieves. He's much more unhinged. I even got some of his quotes down here. He's like, "Fear my power, I'll break them. We must repay blood with blood. I'll tear them apart."
Jesus.
Compared to like when he's prim and proper, when you have him in the party, when he's using Robin Hood
Yeah.
and he's not, using Loki, he's like, "You need my help? Understood. Moving in, I'll do my best," right? Such a like
Yeah.
drastic, change.
That's
Yeah, and
fascinating. I
it
didn't realize there
is.
was a difference in his quotes depending on which persona he had active.
hmm And I think once you have Loki, I don't think you can go back to Robin Hood actually, because why would he go back to Robin Hood if Loki's his true nature, if it's his true self?
Hmm.
But yeah, I just thought the quotes was interesting. Just like looking through the change, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
totally.
So let's see. Ed, do you want to add anything before we get into the case study?
No, no, I don't think so. Yeah, those side concepts that was perfect. Thank you for explaining the Freud id, ego, superego because I had used that like, all right, I had talked about it already earlier, but I didn't even explain it. So
Mm.
that gives some
No, you're
additional
good. You're good.
context. So no, I'd say the case study part that Joe's about to say is kind of like a summary of all of the examples
Hmm.
that might fit a disorder. I mean, it's not just that. It's just like a background. So it's like a extra long paragraph of a condensed background of this character. And
Right.
we did these a lot in our clinical psych class where we read a lot of these and then had to like pick out the pieces and give them some sort of like unofficial diagnoses to these fictional characters, or not fictional
Hmm.
characters, but well, I mean, yeah, they were just made up people. So yeah, so we thought it'd be fun to like kind of do that here and now with these characters as well, to try to bring a little bit of the professional side into this fun, informal like video game. But yeah,
Right.
I'd say go
Yeah.
for it.
Okay. Yeah. And real quick, again, this is a case study. It's not real. We're not, gonna be like, mental health is something important to us, right? I mean, we studied clinical psychology, so this is not to downplay anything, right? This is just, hey, let's pretend the character came into the office, right? And they give us information. And you're gonna have to suspend some disbelief
Mhm.
because, Akechi's killing, right? He's murdering. We have Tersoft, right? And all those like laws that, protect public right and all that stuff. So we're gonna have to suspend our belief for a good amount of this stuff, right? I think even with Maruki as well, right?
Absolutely.
So let's just get into the case study real quick, right? We'll see how this feels like for podcasts moving forward, right? If we need to change it or whatever, but I'll just get into it.
Sure.
So Goro Akechi is an 18-year-old detective living in Tokyo, Japan. Akechi appears proper and charismatic, very eloquent with his words as well. Akechi described his rise to being the second coming of the detective prince and how the public supports what he does in his line of work. However, over time, Akechi's initial prim and proper nature faded away to another side of Akechi that seemed to manifest. Akechi reports complaints of aggressiveness sparked by fits of revenge. According to Akechi, he has taken the lives of his father's enemies. Akechi explained how he avoids detection and hides from the law by committing the murders in the metaverse. Akechi explained how he destroys the shadow self of his father's enemies, which causes a psychotic breakdown at worst, and ends the target's life. I think psychotic breakdown at best and ends the target's life
Yeah.
at worst, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Akechi speaks without any regards to his own safety and the safety of others. According to Akechi, he takes pleasure in fighting enemies referred to as shadows. He demonstrates, having like joy eliminating, he calls them the shadows scum. He effectively targets their weak points. So language like this, Akechi uses. As Akechi details his methods, he destroys the shadows. When he destroys the shadows, he cackles and revels and reminiscing on how scared the shadows seem of him. Let's see. Akechi has reported, little to no social support besides one friend he recently met in the past year. According to Akechi, he's never had any friends, and his family relations are pretty much non-existent. So, according to Akechi, previous clinicians have discussed with him like a diagnosis of conduct disorder in his early teenage years, so getting in trouble. When asked if he that he learned he could use his powers to inflict harm on others, he prefers to use them as a weapon essentially. He learned how to intimidate others from the brief interactions he had with his father. And within the past year, Akechi learned that he enjoys being physically cruel towards the shadows, right? I mean, he's using that type of language, reveling
Hmm.
in destroying his enemies. He mentioned that his long-term goal is to get even with his father and make him pay for his mother's death over, the tumultuous childhood he had. And he described, his mom taking her life at an early age. And this is something Akechi can't forget and can't forgive.
Hmm.
So he doesn't meet, so I was looking at the DSM for antisocial personality, right? Because, he's breaking the laws, right? So we'll just go through, what I have here. So the essential feature of the antisocial personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of disregard and violation of the rights of others that begins in childhood or early adolescence and continues into adulthood. So for this diagnosis to be given, the individual must be at least age 18, must have a history of some symptoms of conduct disorder before age 15, So this is kind of where we have to suspend the disbelief because we don't really know what Akechi was doing when he was 15, right? We don't get that context.
Yeah.
So, even this is fictional. I wouldn't be comfortable with like saying, "Oh yeah, he has a conduct disorder, give him antisocial, right? Personality, right?" But this is kind of like provisional, right? We're just looking at it, what it could be. We're not saying this is what it is. Other reasons to kind of indicate an antisocial personality disorder is to failures to conform to social norms with respectful, lawful behavior. He's performing acts for arrest. I mean, he's murdering people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Individuals with antisocial personality disorder tend to be irritable and aggressive, which they may repeatedly get into physical fights or commit acts of physical assault, which is what's happening, right? Again, this is more antisocial, right? Indifference to hurting others, mistreating others, or stealing from others. There's a point where I mentioned earlier where he just lets it all hang out. He doesn't care, right? He doesn't care who he hurts. He doesn't care about shadows. He wants to just kill Maruki.
Yeah.
So those are some of those things that kind of indicate this. I was looking at conduct disorder. It doesn't fit Akechi. We don't have enough information, right? Meaning that antisocial can, we couldn't even give a diagnosis of that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what kind of like going through Akechi's backstory, the case study. This is kind of what we need more information. So
Yeah.
this is what I have here is antisocial, right? What do you think? Anything to add?
No. I think antisocial kind of makes sense given his like disregard for human life.
Mm-hmm.
He
Yeah.
when I think of antisocial personality disorder, one of the main things I think of is just like a disregard for human life, and it's clearly showing with Akechi willingness to just like kill whoever, I don't know, without fear of consequence.
Right. Well, you can't get caught, right? And
Yeah.
because who's gonna prove the metaverse? Which eventually they do prove it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think Joker gets arrested, right? And they're all like, he didn't kill anyone, and they prove it somehow. Oh, this is anime,
Yeah.
right? So whatever
Yeah.
anime logic they used, right? It's so
Yeah.
weird and difficult to follow, right? Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
I know. It's like, how would you do this in the real world? Yeah, we don't need to worry about that. It's all fake. Yeah, no, nothing to add. Yeah, I remember you talking about conduct disorder for him initially, but that's interesting that didn't quite meet that criteria. And not even
Right.
for antisocial as well, really.
There's just not enough info. The wiki can only do so much, and then I
Yeah.
don't think we can replay the game in our time. We just don't have the time. Right?
It's I put like 140 hours in one playthrough, and I cannot imagine how many hours you have put over 3. So
Over there,
to
yeah,
to replay it right now is a little unrealistic. But yeah, I also feel like a lot of the time, like with a lot of these diagnoses, we're gonna just be assuming stuff based off of what
yeah,
we read. We're not gonna this. That's why I wanted to reiterate so much at the beginning of like how this is in no way like a professional diagnosis, because there's so many things that are missing that we're still just filling in the gaps based off of like the little information we have, just for the fun of it. But yeah, thank you for diagnosing Akechi Goro. Should we tell him like what happens by his story at the end, or I mean, we
So
did say spoiler warning.
yeah, I mean, do you want a section where we just spoil the game? We just gush about it.
Well, I feel like, if I were listening to this and I heard about Akechi, like I want to hear how his story ends. Or you know what? Maybe let's talk about it after, because my character is directly involved with the ending of this
Okay,
game.
yeah, let's do that.
And on that note, the character I am going to be talking about, unless you had something else you wanted to mention about Akechi.
No, I'm sure we revisit it, once we're done with your case study and everything.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. The character I'm going to be talking about, Takuto Maruki. I mean, almost everybody just calls him Maruki in the game, so I'm just going to do the same here.
Yeah,
He is, throughout the game, like the school counselor, as we talked about earlier, or maybe we didn't. I don't know if we talked. I don't know if we were recording.
that he was a
I
school counselor. No, I don't think so. We haven't
Yeah.
mentioned that.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Maruki's like the school counselor for the high school that all of the main characters attend. What is the name of it? The high school again? Shujin
Shujin Academy. I
Academy.
was gonna say Gecko Con High, but I think that's Persona 3. Had Persona 3 on the brain.
Oh, yeah, that's coming out soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like this high school counselor. In all of the main characters, aside for one or two, go to this high school, and this is how they know each other, and they like kind of bonded over shared trauma of certain things and whatnot. But Maruki has been like kind of the centerpiece of them all. He has counseling sessions with them, and he also went through his own stuff that I'm about to describe right now. What was, like I might have mentioned already, what was pretty fascinating about him is he kind of starts off as this passive, like, interesting supporting character to the protagonists. He is not a playable character, but you interact with him pretty much every chance you get at the visual
Hmm.
during the life simulator aspect of the game where you go around talking to people. You usually want to talk to Maruki. Definitely want to do so because unless you get like the rating for him high enough, you won't even unlock the final third of the game. The game will just end.
Right.
There's like a whole other section of the game, a whole other like 40 hours or so of this game that is unlocked if you get your like relationship level with him to the highest rank. But with that being said, there's a lot of stuff that happens to him before the events of this game that are sometimes shown during flashbacks, but once again are just kind of like pieced together, or somebody on the Persona 5 wiki pieced together. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about him now. Before he was a high school counselor, he was working as a research scientist for some university. But while he was working there, his fiance was experiencing debilitating grief. She was even in a hospital. She was mute. She was not talking to anybody because her parents were murdered in, I think it was like was it a break-in entry? Like they were
Something
murdered in
like
her
that.
home overnight. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I forget if she witnessed it as well or if she just heard about it. Obviously, she was very affected by this.
Hmm.
So in like a desperate attempt to cure his wife's grief, he made a deal with, it's not even considered a persona, is it? It was just like some random being, demon
There's
thing.
gods and like demigods and things involved in this franchise, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, suspend disbelief, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
fictional and all, right?
Totally. Gotta suspend disbelief to play video games for the most part, anyways. But yeah, so he made a deal with this being. I didn't even catch his name, this being's name. I'm not sure if the being was named, but it grants him this ability. In the game, it's called actualization, and that is a
Mm.
reference to some other psychology concept that I'm going to talk about later. Um, but for the sake of the game, he gains this power called actualization. What it does for him is it grants him the ability to manipulate anybody's like cognition. And Maruki has like such a good heart that he wants to help everybody and kind of feels
Right,
like they shouldn't experience grief. So what he
right.
ends up doing with this actualization thing is, or actualization ability, is kind of wiping out grief for everybody.
Hmm.
And the first person he uses this on, I believe, is his wife in the hospital because she's experiencing like potentially a prolonged grief disorder, and he wants to cure her of that. So he does that. He uses his ability, but unfortunately, in wiping out her grief, he wipes out all of her memories of him. So they like she just no longer remembers him or remembers who he
Hmm.
is. Doesn't know that that was her boyfriend, fiance. Doesn't have any of the shared memories together. So this, is pretty debilitating to Maruki. He's fascinated by this power, but he's also like grieving because now he kind of essentially lost his fiance. Even though she's
Right.
not dead, she just no longer remembers him. So as good as dead to him. I don't know. That's not true. It's not as good as dead, but it still is like,
It'll mess with you, right? I mean, significant other just I don't remember,
yeah,
right? That's
yeah,
that's tough.
I know. Like, I don't know what I'd do if something like that happened. Anyways, I'm not Maruki right now. So, so it ends up happening because he's like inspired by like this newfound power. He's going to continue his research in cognitive science, and science is spelt with like a P in front of it to allude to like psychology.
Hmm.
And he's doing this research at the university, but the university, after this thing happens, ends up dropping him due to a lack of supporting evidence for this phenomenon, which make sense. How can you provide concrete evidence that this whole metaverse and like this physical manifestation of the psyche exists? And turns out behind the scenes, like his research was actually taken by one of the main villains, Masayoshi Shido. Yeah, who you fight later on in the game.
Yeah.
But the Shido ended up using this ability for his own benefit, or this research for his own benefit. But Maruki didn't know that. So from his point of view, he was just dropped for a lack of evidence and thought that his research for the university just went to waste. So he wanted to continue doing this on his own. And which is why he became a high school counselor. He receives like visits from pretty much every playable protagonist in the game. This game is like split up into 3 semesters.
Right.
And you like have a certain number of things you could do each day. And one of them is like talk to Maruki and talk about certain things. Yeah, so throughout the game, you are visiting Maruki. Maruki is like talking to the characters, talking to you as the main character, but then you also get cutscenes where he's talking to other characters as well. And this occurs throughout the first 2 semesters, but then at the end of the second semester, which is like ends in the middle of November, he eventually departs the high school, the Shujin Academy, to kind of just go and do his own thing. I don't 100% remember why he's leaving. I think he feels like he's just ready to move on or something. And
Yeah,
this
there was
only
a scene,
happens.
right?
Yeah, I
When he
remember
leaves,
there
like it's
being
like a
some
whole
sort of.
announcement and
Mhm.
everything. Yeah.
It was like a big thing, but I don't remember what the motivation he told people as to why he was leaving. I
Yeah,
think he just
I
felt
don't
like,
remember.
yeah, I think he felt like he was just like he did his job there. I'm also pretty sure this only happens once you reach that max level of relationship with him. So then he kind of unfortunately turns into the villain for the final part of the game, which is wild because he was like such a kind and helpful soul. But he eventually awakens kind of his own persona, and he eventually like fuses the mementos and the real world.
I think so.
And that was him, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't somebody else. I think with this actualization power, he fuses like the mementos, which is like the collective unconscious, with the real world. And this like kind of blurs reality. And Maruki's like kind of evil persona, very much driven by the desire to get rid of grief for the world,
Right.
becomes his driving force now, and it turns
He
him
doesn't
into
want
this
anyone to
villain.
suffer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no suffering. He wants to rid the world of pain and suffering by granting them this eternal happiness through his actualization power. And, you know, this, as we have already seen with his fiance, will wipe their cognition if this were to become a reality. So obviously the main character, the group of them, the Phantom Thieves, they are not down with this. So they confront him, and he actually offers them a choice to either accept this new reality in which none of the characters experience any of the trauma, like no lost loved ones, no, I don't know, mom or dad issues, all of that to be gone if they choose to accept this new reality that he will create. Of course, they don't want that. So, well, actually, the game kind of does something interesting where they give you a choice. So you could choose to accept this reality, and then the game will end early, and you'll kind of get like this post-credits cutscene. Then the main protagonist and I think Akechi like kind of look at you suspiciously. They look at the camera suspiciously if you accept his reality and then end the game. So of course, us being completionists, we don't accept this reality. We want to fight against it. So we end up fighting against this, and this causes like a series of fights where he eventually like summons more powerful personas that you end up fighting. And of course, like if you persist and if you win, you defeat him. And his, oh man, we didn't even talk about the palace objects. When you defeat like a villain in their palace, there's usually like an object that you could take from there that helps them like kind of return to normal. So in this case, Maruki's object was a torch, which I found like very symbolic. I mean, a torch, a lit torch, you know, it provides light, it provides warmth, and all of these things. All of these like beneficial things, I guess, positive things. I'm not too sure what kind of message the game creators were trying to make there by making his object a torch, but I would assume it has something to do with his inner desire to help people and warm and like create light, and alluding to Plato's cave of like creating this light and informing the people to get them out of the cave and get them out of the darkness. But yeah, so that's the object in there. And then once you beat him, you take his object, then he returns to normal. He returns the world to normal, defusing them from the mementos, and he erases his false reality that he had created. So he returns reality to normal. They end up kind of doing a time skip a little bit, and you see him as a taxi driver because he like
Yeah.
left his job as like a counselor, and he actually ends up like helping the main character Joker get to the train station, I think, while the government is like kind of chasing him, because I think Joker's like eluding arrest or something. Yeah,
I thought
so
he was free. I thought, they proved like, hey, he's not a criminal. Because there is a part where like there's petitions, like his friends are doing petitions, right, to get him out of there.
yeah,
He didn't kill anyone. He didn't. I mean, sure, he hurt metaphysical shadow, whatever, right? But like, they really had nothing on him.
yeah, totally agree.
I mean, he was carrying a BB gun. Maybe that's enough to
I
get that
thought
out of him.
I
I
don't know, because
mean,
I read that there were or not government agents. It just said that agents were like chasing him, and I do remember him being chased, but I don't know if they were like government or who was chasing him at the end
mhm.
there. I do remember him like trying to get away from someone, and Maruki helped get him to the train station to get him away. It was just like a nice full circle moment where Maruki, comes back and helps save them after all, even though he was trying to kill them in one way or another. But yeah, I think I wanted to return back real quick to talk about Akechi's fate, because it's tied in with the end of this game. And do you remember what happens,
Yeah.
or do you want to tell them?
No, I can
Yeah,
interject. So during Shido's palace, which is kind of like the last palace, right? You're fighting Shido, Akechi's dad, right? So there's a part where Akechi dies, right? It's implicated,
yeah,
right? We don't get
yeah,
confirmation, right? So essentially, he traps himself to defeat his shadow, so the shadow can't hurt you or whatever. And so
hmm,
like he's not a party member anymore after that. So when the
yeah,
third semester rolls around with Maruki, right? Akechi shows up. And the original vanilla, we just assumed Akechi was gone. He died. To see him again in the third semester, right? That could say a lot about the protagonist. Like, hey, is the protagonist like perfect world a place where Akechi is alive? Is that why Akechi is with us now? And Maruki was able to make that happen, right? With actualization. So there's the third
yeah,
semester is so good because it's like even
yeah,
Akechi like looks at the protagonist also and it's like, no, you need to end this, right? Do you think my life, me being alive, is enough for you to live in this fake world? Like Akechi knows he's gonna die. He's dead.
yeah.
That's what's implicated. He doesn't care. He's all like, no, you don't live in this fake world. Don't do it for me.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, when you beat Maruki, there's like the protagonist is on the train, right? And you do see Akechi with like some, I don't know, government agent or something, or you see him like really quick, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah, I do vaguely remember that. And then I found that weird because I felt like I read that he died. So I was like, wait, I kind of remember Akechi though. So I
Hmm.
don't know. But he's alive.
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, I don't know if I approve of that. Because it's like, okay, so what is the reason why he's still alive? Why wasn't he with the group, when they said goodbye and Joker's back on his way home? Also, why would Joker want to go
Yeah.
back home? His parents didn't care.
Yeah.
Right? Have you thought about that? Like, not once at all did parents check in on him, right? They're like, you do
I
your
know.
thing, whatever, right? But
I know. This whole
Persona,
time,
right?
did he have any relation to the coffee shop owner?
Uh,
Was that like his uncle? I forget. No,
No, I
right?
don't think so. No, I don't know what the relation is. I
Yeah.
know in Persona 4, the protagonist lives with his uncle, so parents send him, to live with his uncle. But I
All
don't know
right.
in P5 if there's anything
Yeah.
like that.
It might have just been some random dude who took pity on him, and I mean, he's not random in the game because you eventually like learn more about him and interact more with him, and he kind of becomes your father figure. Okay, so yeah, that I'm glad we saved the Akechi talk for now, or like Akechi's conclusion for now. Yeah. So with that being said, yeah. So some of the psych concepts that I mentioned and that we have both already said a few times is actualization. This is clearly a reference to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in which like self-actualization is at the top of this pyramid slash hierarchy. And this hierarchy is, like I just said, it is a pyramid. With the stuff on the bottom is like kind of more of the basic stuff, like a physical need, like food, water, warmth, and rest.
Hmm.
And then as you move higher, it becomes a bit more psychological. And then the highest of self-actualization, it becomes self-fulfillment needs. Some people will describe this as like achieving your full potential. Yeah, whatever that embodies to you. So the fact that Maruki received this power called actualization is also symbolic in that this might be what the directors were like, or not the directors, but like what Maruki was envisioning of just like being his best self is being able to
Hmm.
get rid of
It's
grief for
his
everybody.
purpose and
Yeah.
meaning, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, damn, I love that. I love that they include like all these concepts and interweave them into the story. But yeah, so Maslow himself was just a psychologist in like the 30s to 60s ish era. He helped create like the humanistic approach to psychology, which was a bit different at the time because this referred to treating the patient as like a whole person rather than just a person with these symptoms and illnesses that need to be cured. So it looked at the people as, or it looked at each patient as a person as opposed to an illness or something like that. Yeah, put more emphasis on the positive aspects of humans, and through treatment, they sought to help people obtain their highest possible potential in the form of self-actualization. And yeah, like I said, this self-actualization only occurs after all other needs are met. So I think with that being said, yeah, we have the self-actualization, but other than Maslow, some other concepts that came into play with Maruki's fiance. Her name's Rumi. As I might have briefly mentioned, she might have suffered from a prolonged grief disorder or potentially catatonic depression. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this like I will with Maruki's case study, but just to quickly summarize it, the prolonged grief disorder was a relatively new one. And Joe, thank you for pointing this one out to me. This has... Yeah, it's like an intense feeling of persistent and prolonged grief that is interfering with their daily life, which is kind of what Rumi was suffering from and why she wasn't
Right.
speaking.
And then
But
this
I think,
disorder was recently added as well. I don't mean to cut you off.
no,
Um,
no, no,
this was
please.
something like newly added because I think when we were in school, this is not in the DSM, right?
Yeah, I didn't remember this at all. I'm appreciative that you knew about this and sent it to me. Another potential diagnosis that I think Rumi could have had would be catatonic depression. In this case, like catatonia, it has different, what is it called? Like it surfaces differently for each person. But in this one, it would be her inability to really like function.
Right.
Like she is so depressed, in a depressed mood for the majority of the day, that she is unable to like function. She has no pleasure in anything. She's either sleeping all day or maybe stays awake all night. Yeah, there's a whole list of symptoms I could read that she might have fit this criteria. So that was another quick thing for Rumi. Back to Maruki. I did a case study write up for him as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just like read through that.
Go for
And
it.
then,
Yeah.
talk about some of the diagnoses that he might suffer from. So Maruki is a young adult male who is currently a high school counselor. Maruki experienced great grief when his fiancée who was dealing with depression due to the murder of her family, no longer spoke to Maruki and was virtually unresponsive in the hospital. So Maruki used his powers to erase his fiancée's mind, causing her to forget him, and sent Maruki into a grief state due to her perceived loss of a loved one.
Hmm.
Maruki then became a high school counselor to help others with their suffering. Maruki eventually leaves the school and becomes obsessed with the thought of providing eternal happiness to everyone. This causes Maruki to attack his previous students, who he was a counselor to, in an attempt to convince them to see his point of view. Maruki even goes so far as to hold hostage to one of the students, Kasumi, or Sumire, during a fit of rage, which he does eventually release her and gives over to the Phantom Thieves. Or, sorry, he does give him to the Phantom Thieves, and gives the Phantom Thieves a deadline of which to accept his offer of providing the world with eternal happiness. And after having his offer rejected, Maruki attacks the Phantom Thieves, ultimately losing the battle and returning to his previous caring self. So what we see here, There's definitely a hint of the antisocial personality disorder here that you described with Akechi. I noted a few symptoms there, but I knew you were going to be talking about it, so I focused a bit more on post-traumatic stress disorder, which does
Okay.
seem to be something else he might be suffering from. Once again, with a lot of these disorders, you have a list of criteria that must be met. There'll be like 5+ different sections that'll say stuff like, I'm reading it right now. For example, for post traumatic stress disorder, exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in one or more of the following ways. So in this case, we saw Maruki have a traumatic event occur to someone close to him. So while he wasn't a direct witness, he was still someone he loved was directly affected by it. He also experienced somewhat dissociative reactions, recurrent distressing memories of the event. So another criteria is that he might assume he is avoiding the situation. The situation being like dealing with his loss of a loved one, his perceived loss of a loved one. And we could also argue that he has persistent negative beliefs about the world due to his desire to get rid of grief for everybody, and a
Hmm.
persistent negative state when he kind of activates his persona, as well as a detachment from those he previously cared about, which is pretty important considering he was like the counselor to these children, and now he, in his like angry state, has detached from them. And this plays into one of the final criteria that he was irritable and reckless destructive behavior, which is apparent in his desire to pretty much kill the Phantom Thieves if they didn't accept his offer.
He was ready to fight.
Yeah, so when you combine all of these, what was that? Sorry.
I was just saying he was ready to fight. Right. He gave them a deadline.
Oh,
It was
yeah,
either challenge me or accept a world without
totally.
struggle.
Yeah, it was wild. But yeah, so he could arguably have had post traumatic stress disorder, and that could have triggered some things and caused him to, I don't know, enter this state of rage. And once again, like we're just kind of stretching the truth here just to see, what thing they might fit into.
Right.
But I think that kind of concludes it for Persona segment of this. We talked in length about the characters that we were pretty passionate about. Tried to describe as much as possible the other characters, the ones that might have pertained to the story. I didn't think too much about how to conclude this, really. I know we also want to talk about what we've been playing, and I don't know if we want to talk about news or not, but I put some of the stuff there. But yeah, was there anything else you wanted to say about Persona before we like shift into the final little segment?
Okay. I mean, I think we said a lot. I felt like we went through a lot, especially with, Akechi's and Maruki's case study, right? And again, I just want to say, this is all fictional, right? Suspend disbelief. Like we're just doing this for fun.
Mm.
Kind of like, what would it be like if these characters walked into our office, walked into our classroom, and we were in grad school, and we're like, all right, what's the case study diagnose, right? No, and I mean, there's so much we can go into. I feel like we do a whole podcast on
Each
like
character.
each semester of the game
Yeah.
and explain it, right? And character and shoot even every persona,
Yeah.
like a history of the lore and all that stuff, but no, I mean, I
Yeah.
think we went through a lot, again, Persona, like if you haven't played these games are amazing. They're very long though, I will say. These aren't like 5-10 hours, right? You're gonna be reading a lot. You're gonna be doing a lot of the same stuff. So it's not a chore, but it's a commitment. I mean, what do you think about
Yeah.
Persona?
What I think of Persona, this was my first experience into this game. I loved it. It was a lot. Like I said, it's not a light game. There's a lot of heavy concepts. There's a lot of triggering things in here as well. So if you feel like you're not in the best like mental space to have to deal with a lot of the stuff that they talk about, then yeah, definitely don't feel like you have to play this game. It's a great game, but it's also pretty heavy on the psych stuff. There's a lot of like heavy kind of depressing topics in there. As far as like as a video game, I absolutely loved it. It's in like a top 5 I think of all time for me, for definitely for RPGs, maybe for just like every video game in general. I really loved this game, and I fell in love with the characters, the gameplay, all of it. It didn't feel like it took 140 hours to beat. It really just flew by. I
Oh yeah.
loved this game. So I'm so glad we had a chance to talk about it. Cool. So yeah, I guess now is a good time to then just dive into what else we've been playing. This is going to be the end of our Persona 5 segment. So if you're like, I don't care about what they're playing. I'll put a timestamp here
Yeah,
so
you
that you
can
can
dip.
just, know to end, end
Thank you
right
for
now.
listening
But
this long. If you have been listening this long,
yeah, I know. I was going to say that too. I'm like, I know this was a journey. I know we probably got a little bit rambly. We'll, try to hone in on some stuff for future pods. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to the Persona discussion so far. Yeah, it's been fun. But cool. Yeah, Joe, tell me about Final Fantasy VII Remake.
oh yeah. Okay, let's get started. Where do I begin? um,
Yeah.
yeah. So Final Fantasy. I played OG Final Fantasy 7. Right. That was. I love Final Fantasy 7, but I didn't grow up with it. So I
Mhm.
recently played it when I was in grad school. So I didn't have any nostalgia factor with it, right? And I think I remember telling you like, hey, I'm probably not gonna play the remake until I finish the OG.
Yeah.
Finally finished the OG, and I was like, I saw what Rebirth had to offer, and I was like, you know what? Let me jump into Remake. So I think from early January, I put in about what, like 34, 35 hours into Remake. You
Oh my
know,
gosh.
it was wild, and this was one of my slower weeks of work. So, and I was a little upset that it was a slower week because we just got back from the holidays, spending money, right?
Yeah.
But it worked out. I mean, I just flew through that game, and I have much more an appreciation of Cloud, Aerith,
Mhm.
Barrett, right? Tifa. It's so different from the OG because like even in remake, do you remember the whispers or like those little ghost guys that like and
Oh
their
yeah.
purpose? Yeah, that's not in
I
OG
love
at
that.
all. Like
It's like to kind of keep them on the main
yeah,
timeline, correct? And then they're obviously trying to fight against it.
yeah. So, this is more kind of like actiony, right? But it also has RPG elements where you can stop time a little bit, and, do a cross slash, focus
Hmm.
thrust or whatever. It was just a really good time, going through the game
Yeah.
as Cloud. This all takes place in Midgar, and in the OG version, Midgar was maybe 5 or 6 hours. You could probably
Ooh.
speed run through it. So the fact that remake was just all Midgar, I was like, huh, okay, interesting. But no, I mean, I had a
Yeah.
lot of fun with it, and I love the battle system. The summons are cool, and then I was able to even play intergrade, because I wanted to
Hmm.
get this all out of the way before Rebirth. I mean, there's so many games coming out. We keep talking about Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, Persona 3, Dragon's Dogma. It's just like there's so much stuff, right?
Ooh.
So I'm glad I
They
was able
never
to get
end.
through all of that. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a really good time.
I know, yeah. I played this. I played the remake. I never played the original, but I played the remake when it first came out and absolutely loved it. So much so that that's going to be our next episode, which we'll probably put out at the same time as this one. So if you like this, go ahead and check out our Final Fantasy VII remake discussion. We kind of wanted to do it around the same time Final Fantasy VII Rebirth comes out, and we're eventually going to do that as a pod too. But yeah, I'm glad you had a great time with it. That game was so fun. Have you been playing anything else, or I mean, that's kind of like a lot. Two
It was a
RPGs
lot.
back to back.
Yeah, because I was like, I need to get this done before Persona 3, right? Before Tekken 8,
Yeah.
Yakuza, right? So I was able to do that. Other than
Oh
that,
yeah.
I played the free part of the DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and
Oh
Violet.
right, right.
Yeah, there's like a new Pokemon called Pecharunt where it like
Yeah,
enchants people and makes them dance and ask for mochi.
that's cute.
It's cute. It's
Huh.
wild. At first I was like, do I really care? It was worth the hour. I mean, it was really cute. You get some good fights in there,
Oh,
and
nice.
I love Pokemon. So whatever they'll give me, I'll play.
Yeah.
I'm not too harsh on those games because working right and other responsibilities, I'll take what I can get. But yeah,
Totally.
I mean, I had fun with it. Highly recommend Final Fantasy VII Remake if anyone out there is like, yo, is there something I can play? Or Rebirth is just
Hmm.
around the corner, and in a month from now. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's
I
what I've
know.
been playing. What about you?
It's been so soon. Yeah, so I've been playing Sea of Stars, which is funny because I felt like I really fell in love with that game, and then I hit this part and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to get through this game anymore." And then of course I like fought through that, and then I ended up beating it just a couple days ago, and really happy I did cuz that story I feel like concluded very well. There was a lot of heartfelt moments in that game, and it kind of gripped me unexpectedly. I wasn't expecting to like fall this deep into the game. I know you were thinking of playing it,
Hmm.
but probably not anytime soon. I also don't really want to. I'll put spoiler warning here. Is that okay if I
Yeah,
talk about the game a
go
bit?
for it. Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
gonna like I love what Sea of Stars does, right? I've seen reviews,
Yeah.
but man, this year is so packed with games that the backlog is not gonna have a chance to get
I
worked
know.
on. No way.
I know. I think that's why I wanted to get it out of the way. Not get it out of the way, but experience it now before more stuff drops. But yeah, I'll spoiler warning for Sea of Stars right now. So I thought I was about to fight the final boss. Which came at about 2/3 of the way through the game, because you go through this area called the Sea of Stars, which is literally, it's kind of like at the end of, oh shit, spoiler warning for Starfield. It's kind of like the end of Starfield,
Okay.
where before the loop occurs, where you are in this like the fourth or fifth dimension, I guess, depending on how you're counting it, and you see all these different universes and stars and stuff. It's kind of like that, where you're sailing on a boat through a 2D depiction of this, of just like you're sailing through a bunch of stars through the sky. But then it does something kind of incredible, and it shifts to 3D for a little bit, and then you are going towards this black hole in like now a three-dimensional space. Kind of looks like Starfield. Like it feels like it was animated well enough where it legit kind of looked like Starfield. It looked a bit more realistic graphics wise. And then you enter the black hole. And I was like, oh shit, let's go. Final boss. I'm ready for it. But then one of the characters in your party is just like, uh, yeah, so welcome to my world. And I actually kind of lied to you guys this whole time because I needed your help. The final boss that you want to kill is actually here. So this is going to be a 2-for-1. Like, you can help me and we're going to kill the boss together. But yeah, now you're going to have to go and help all these other towns and villages and sail through. It was just like a whole other map of the main game was unlocked. And I was
Oh,
just
okay.
like, after such a climactic moment of flying into a black hole, I was like very lit down by all of a sudden be like, okay, now let's start over again. And I'm like, God damn it. I really just wanted to enjoy that moment and like get into the fight and enjoy the end thereafter. But yeah, there were some slow parts once you get into that new area. I just like try to blaze through them, and then I got to the final fight, and yeah, it was still satisfying. It was a great conclusion. You actually, the final like turn-based fight is against like someone who you had a relationship with before, so there's like a lot of emotional connection there because they turned evil. And then the final fight is actually a what is it called? Where a bullet hell. It turns into a
Oh,
bullet hell.
okay. A little
Yeah.
near
For
automata. If you ever.
yeah. It was giving Nier Automata vibes for sure. Yeah, and so that was like pretty interesting. Just to, and the fight was actually really simple. I think they wanted it to be simple because yeah, they after like fighting, doing the main fight mechanic with this big bad villain, they wanted to give you something to easy to go out with. So I appreciated that. And yeah, there's even some post game content actually. I haven't gone back to do it. I might go back to do it. But yeah, overall, really enjoyed this game. Definitely would have been a top 10 last year had I finished it.
Right.
But yeah, the other game I've been playing a lot of is Palworld, which is making a lot of headlines at the
Oh,
time of
yes,
this
it
recording.
is. Oof, a
Yeah,
lot of it. I mean, it looks like a really fun game.
it is. I thought it was just going to be like a meme, but it is actually really fun. Like, I'm enjoying it a lot. I've kind of hit a bit of a wall, like where I feel like I need a bit more incentive to explore.
Uh-huh.
Like finding new pals or new mons or whatever you want to call them is pretty cool, but after a while, it just starts feeling a bit stale when that's all you're doing when you explore is like finding new monsters to catch or interact with. I do know there's some like boss fights in towers and stuff, so I do want to go and seek those out. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like survival game. I guess I am now a big fan of survival games. I didn't really realize it till I started playing this, but yeah, I enjoy it a lot. So
Okay.
it's been a good time.
Yeah, that's something. I'll wait for, like, when the game is fully released. There's just so many games coming out, right? But
I
Palworld is
know.
on that list of, like, I love monster taming games. I think we've talked about monster taming games here and there,
Oh
right?
yeah,
No, it looks really
totally.
fun. I mean, I've been watching streams and whatnot, and people seem to be enjoying it. So
Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, well, I think we are getting close on our time limit, so
yes, we are.
I think that's gonna conclude our first episode. Damn, Joe, you have any any parting words to commemorate this occasion?
Let's see. I mean, this was fun. I'm
Yeah.
doing this right after a day of work, right? I'm still at work, but this was
Yeah.
something to
Thank.
look forward to. And this is fun. I mean, we get to chill and chat, right? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe some people will like that, you know.
Yeah,
You know,
I hope so.
I appreciate any listeners, honestly. Especially if you stuck this long. This is not a short
Yeah.
it's not a short podcast. I think we're trying to shoot for 2-hour podcasts each time, right?
Yeah, and I think our release cadence will probably be like every other week.
Hmm.
So yeah, or I mean, we'll see. We'll see once
We'll
we get the
see,
ball
yeah.
rolling. But yeah, yeah. No, I really appreciate everybody for sticking this long, staying this long, and listening to us. And I appreciate you, Joe, for being able to do this, being willing to do this after a long work day. So thank you so much.
No, same to you. Thank you for, bringing me on, and let's do this together, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
a good time. I'm not gonna lie, it's a
Yeah.
good time.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so. I've been having a lot of fun with this, even like putting together the documents and stuff. But anyway, so like I might have mentioned earlier, our next episode is going to be Final Fantasy VII Remake. Yeah, we're gonna have to start working on that, and then we'll record a pod. It'll be a similar vibe of like talking about the game and then talking about some characters. So
Yeah,
yeah,
case
we hope you
study,
tune into that
right?
one. But yeah, thank you all so much.
Do you want to say who we're working on for, what characters, or should we keep that a surprise?
Oh, I mean, we could tell them. You go for it.
Okay. So I know we're focusing on remake, but I really loved Zack as a character. So
Mm-hmm.
and I played Crisis Core back in, maybe 2010 something, 2000 the 2010s, right, on PSP. So I really love Zack, and I'll be working on Cloud as well. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm kind of fascinated by Barrett being like a parent and putting his life on the line for bettering the world for his daughter. So I'm going to be talking about Barrett and I think Aerith as well. We'll see what she's got going on. But yeah, hope you all tune into the next one. And yeah, thank you again for listening.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.